Our last panelist is Ms. Sara Mazur. She's an enterprise architect and principal solutions consultant at MarkLogic with a focus on state and local government agencies. She's presented at numerous government industry conferences around the world. She's also a key contributor to a book that Semantics for Dummies, if any of you want to know what semantics is. And she has a blog on cloud neutrality. Sara?
Thank you, Cheryl. So you see that we're all doing something different or unexpected. So I'm going to liven things up a little bit and walk around. Hopefully you don't mind. And I'm going to tell you a story about one of our customers. Okay? So imagine you are the CTO of a large government organization, and you're working on a very controversial project. There are a lot of eyes on you. And you're mandated by law to go live on a particular date. There's no delays allowed. And the second you go live, there'll be millions of people banging on your website, some of them bad actors. And you know that there are thousands of pages of legislation coming your way that'll eventually need to be turned into business rules and then code. You may be working with about 51 other government agencies, but in what capacity, you don't know. They haven't made up their mind. Then there's probably about 10 or so federal agencies that you're going to have to share data with, and countless commercial entities as well. There's a lot of unknowns there, right? So you've probably figured out I'm talking about CMS, so that's the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, and the project that goes by many names, the federally funded marketplace, FFM, healthcare.gov, or Obamacare. So ACA was signed into law in March of 2010. And at that time, they had already chosen Oracle to be the primary relational database behind healthcare.gov. They had so many unknowns, though. So are you going to be able to mandate a common schema for all the states, the insurers, all the federal agencies? I don't know. Do you want to do that? They knew that they would have to do a lot of data modeling. And in fact, 2 years later, they're still doing data modeling. They're not making any progress. They realize they're not going to meet that go-live date that's mandated by law. What are they going to do? They're going to have to switch to a more agile solution. So back in May 2012, they signed with my company, MarkLogic, to be the database behind healthcare.gov. Then not long after that, they signed again with MarkLogic to be the data services hub component, the part that communicates with all of the other federal agencies to determine eligibility. And that was in January 2013. So if you look at it, CMS, the most complicated IT project in all of US history, switched to a newer generation technology, completed a project in 13 months, or 18 months, depending on how you look at it, whether it was the FFM or the Data Services Hub. You contrast that with the state of Oregon, who chose to stick with Oracle on an older relational technology, spent 5 years working on a solution, still doing data modeling, eventually had to give up and join the federally funded marketplace. Now there's a lesson in there somewhere. Maybe it's more risky to continue doing things that you've always done instead of trying something new. And in fact, if you've ever heard Henry Chow speak, he'll say that he chose MarkLogic for 2 reasons. The first is to reduce risk, and the second is to future-proof healthcare.gov against all of the unknowns that he had. So how does this technology reduce risk and future-proof projects? Well, if you have a lot of unknowns, such as all the states still trying to figure out what they're doing, legislation coming down, all the integration points in your architecture not worked out, you know you cannot model everything up front. You're going to have to choose a more agile technology. So they chose an enterprise-grade NoSQL technology. So what is NoSQL? Well, it can mean no, we don't support SQL, or in the case of MarkLogic, we support SQL and other things as well. And NoSQL is an umbrella term also for newer generation technologies such as graph stores, column stores, or document-based databases. MarkLogic is actually a multi-model database. So we support structured data, unstructured data, and linked data all together. But under the hood, we are a document-based repository. Turns out, documents are perfect for CMS. If you think of a web service, well, that fits really nicely in a document. It doesn't fit very well in a table. Also, the complexities of a human being. Does that fit very well in tables, rows, and columns? Also, an insurance policy, well, that is a document. So them choosing a document store makes perfect sense. And then you can load in all of this data as is without doing any data modeling up front. You can use our integrated search engine to be able to search on that data, see what you have, see what kind of links automatically based on some of the search algorithms that we have. Also, then you can figure out what entities you need to focus on first. So now you've got your application development going at the same time as your data harmonization that significantly reduces the time it takes to develop a project. And that's what CMS did. It's how they got a project done in just such a short time. So this type of technology could benefit somebody like Tracy at Caltrans. So what if you took this unstructured weather data and determined if that affects construction? You know, what if you had a bridge spec and tied that to the maintenance of the specs along with the Internet of Things sensor data all together in one common repository? Would that benefit anybody at Caltrans? I think so. And she'll also have to make sure that this data is very secure. She'll need to choose an enterprise-grade technology that has perhaps element-level encryption, element-level redaction. If she's going to feed downstream systems, it'll need to support transactions, web services, maybe high availability and disaster recovery. Maybe her DevOps people will want her to make sure that there's integrated monitoring as well as configuration management. So all of these are enterprise technologies that are out there in these newer generation databases. So it's something that people should be considering. And then as Clark mentioned, you know, what do you know? When did you know it? Well, document-based databases are perfect for that too, because it's very easy to add any timestamp information into a document. It's just one property in a JSON document or element in XML, as opposed to changing your whole schemas in a relational database. Then there's this concept of bitemporal support. So we have that. That means that you can, from the very beginning, track data along two timelines. When it changes in the system and when it changes in real life. Those are often different things. And to answer the hard questions about who knew what when, and believe me, we have a lot of customers in our financial sector that need to do that. They need to justify their trades. They need to be able to quickly answer that question. A relational system, you know, it's very hard to go and change your schemas. If you're going to look at bitemporal data, you'd have to date range a whole bunch of tables or load up a backup and then compare that with real-time data manually. Those questions, you know, can take weeks or months in a relational system, but a NoSQL technology, it's very easy to do very quickly. So what about your data and your projects? So do you have data that is unpredictable, that is in different shapes and sizes, customers that you didn't know that you had? Is data governance, risk mitigation, security very important to you? So I think so, and I think that you can still plan for the future and reduce risk and have shorter development times if you look at these newer generation technologies. So thank you.
Thank you, Sara. I think Sara did a good job of pulling together, we have three different perspectives here. We have Tracy, who is an IT manager. Clark, besides being Mr. Fix-It, is a lawyer. And then Sara, your engineer. So you have three different perspectives, but it's really the same problem, right? So if you're working in state government, and I've been proud to work both inside state government as a state employee and on the outside, I've always served government. Accountability, I think that, Clark, that point is very well taken. I don't know anybody that I've worked with inside state government who felt like they didn't want to be accountable or to provide the information that they needed for accountability, but it was often difficult to get to. Having said that, we have a few minutes for questions. And while you're thinking about your questions, and we don't have microphones, so you'll just have to shout it out, and I'll repeat it for you. But I wanted to ask the first question, if you don't mind, if you'll give me a chance. So when Tracy was talking, and she was talking about the Internet of Things, things started rolling through my head like asphalt. Is asphalt collecting data? And Tracy said yes, which I think is amazing, because then what else is collecting data and how much data is that? But the other thing is self-driving cars. Aren't you all curious? Like, self-driving cars are right around the corner. Might that have an impact on Caltrans?
Yes. Are these on?
Yep.
Yes. Self-driving cars definitely will have and has had already an impact on Caltrans. Just a very simple example of that is the striping on the roadways. For self-driving cars, they need distinct markings on the roadways to be able to navigate and be able to know that they're in the right lane, things like that. So just that simple thing, you don't think, well, how hard is that? Well, when you're talking about 15,000 miles of lanes, that's a lot of striping. But what they've said is they need it to be very distinct. So that's already an impact that it's had on Caltrans.
Wow. That's amazing. I can't wait for self-driving cars, by the way. I'm a fan. Any questions from the audience? Y'all good? Yes.
It's kind of a two-part question. First question is, are you guys using data from apps like Waze or Google Maps and integrating that with your systems? And then what information are you also sharing with them or with the public with the information that you're collecting?
So the answer is yes. If you were at the last PSP event we did a marketing on an application that we've had for a while, and we released it to Apple and to Google, and it's called Quick Map. And in that right now today, the base layer of that is Google Maps. So we utilize information that they have, and we also make available the data that we collect that is available to those types of organizations and others to be able to utilize that. The traffic, I've seen some of our cameras, if you, the morning shows in the mornings, no matter where you are in the state of California, you see a Caltrans map pop up, or a Caltrans, actually local here in Sacramento, they use our actual Quick Map. They actually use our mapping, but there you also see the cameras. They'll show you what's it look like on 50 or 80 or whatever. And the waste question, yes, that's actually an improvement that we're working on right now. We hope to release it within the next 45 days, where we are ingesting waste data, and we'll make that another layer that you can choose as an option to actually have it visible on the Quick Map application or hide it. And other direction, we are also sharing data with them.
Quick Maps is really cool. Everybody should get it. I use it every day coming up 99, of course not while I'm driving.
Thank you. No texting and driving.
Great. More questions? Yes.
So this question is for Tracy, my previous boss.
Hi, Sammy.
Tracy, do you use the amount of traffic data for future? I've been living in Sacramento for 20 years now. How much growth, right? We grew like anything. But you still have the same cities, you still have the same needs. From an infrastructure perspective, do you do like a predictive analysis? There is so much growth, but the same highways, the same lanes.
So let me repeat the question
Thank you.
for you. The question was, does Caltrans use traffic for the future around predictive analytics?
Yes, so the answer is yes. Even in what I spoke about earlier, we use that data to determine where our projects are going to be in the future. If any of you lived in Roseville and had to do across the top, how long did that project take? But that project was driven by the traffic data. There was definitely a need to widen the freeways. Highway 50 never had commute lanes. It now has commute lanes. It's wider. Up, I don't travel 50 very often, so sorry, I don't know exactly how far up. But, we've widened the freeway, we've added more lanes. Down in LA and some of the more metropolitan areas, we can't widen, so that's where the commute management stuff that we're partnering with the locals in. We're using their data and our data to try and determine how best to move traffic. So sometimes when it's viable and it's the right solution, we will widen, we'll create commute lanes and things, high occupancy vehicle lanes, things like that. But in other instances, we have to even get more creative. If you travel down to the Bay Area, you're on 80, you'll see some of our new messaging, new signs that go all the way across the freeways, and it has different information. Instead of having to look at your phone, which is a no-no, you now have that information available to you on the freeways. You can see commute times using different freeways. If there's an accident, one of the visions is to be able to give you alternative routes on those messaging signs. So we're trying to be very innovative in how we utilize our data to do predictive analytics, to look at where should we be doing our next big projects.
I'd like to ask a question. Thank you,
Uh-oh.
Tracy. Well, I'll direct this at Mr. Kelso. You said an interesting thing about security being nightmarish, and I think that it's a thing that everybody shares. If you are responsible or a custodian for data, that security is your nightmare. How do you balance between security and the need to share data? Do you have nuggets for us? Because you have to share internally and externally.
Sure. Well, I think two things that we spend a lot of time looking at. First are the legal requirements. And certainly with health data, there are all sorts of legal requirements in addition to the requirements that everybody else has to deal with on confidential information and personally identifiable information. But we've got then state laws, we've got federal laws dealing with health information that we have to comply with. There are regulations that we also have to comply with. So one of the things we do is make sure that our legal counsel's office has expertise in this general topic. We just don't, leave it up to last-second deliberations. We've got people who are assigned to know about the legal requirements for data sharing. So there's a legal aspect to it, and then there is just a very practical aspect to it. Who can we share with and feel comfortable in the way we are sharing information? So, for example, when we release inmates down in Los Angeles, we need to be able to share medical and in particular mental health information with local authorities. How do we do that? Not just so that it's legally correct, but so that we're comfortable that, okay, the information's being shared, but also protected. And for that, you have to rely largely upon your IT people and your security people, making sure they understand that you've got those dueling obligations. Mm-hmm. Usually, there's a technology solution to it so that you can feel comfortable that it's secure, but it's also readily accessible by people who need to use it. The bigger, I think, broader answer to your question, and it really is the answer to, I think, the nightmare problem. How do you avoid that nightmare? Well, the answer is you don't go to sleep.
Yeah.
So constant vigilance at all levels throughout the organization is what you have to do. And at the leadership level, you have to be constantly asking, are we secure? A practical example, what it was 2 months ago or a month ago, I guess, there was a worldwide cyber attack that brought down health information systems all over the globe. All right, so my first call was to my IT people saying, and as soon as I saw the report, I was on the phone saying, well, are we protected? Now, it turns out, yeah, actually, a month before, we had installed the necessary patches to protect ourselves. All right, that's a win for us. But a lot of people hadn't. And, apparently the British Health Service hadn't. Probably because they had taken their eye off the security ball. You really have to invest in it in order to make yourself comfortable, given the current threats to data that exist throughout the world.
So constant vigilance and anticipating.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And resourcing your IT and security people and making sure that your lawyers are involved. I guess it's not a single initiative anymore. It's an IT initiative, it's a legal initiative, it's a budget question, and you have to actually engage up at the highest levels of the organization to make sure you do it correctly. I was thinking in your comments, how do I decide what the underlying infrastructure should be for a project? The data architecture. Well, 5-10 years ago, that wouldn't be a director or an executive type decision. It'd be an IT decision, I guess. But, what I'm hearing from you is no, you probably need to actually have your IT people brief your program executives about what are the implications of different architectures, because it'll make a huge difference, quite clearly, in what you can do with the data that you have. So, increasingly these things all make their way up to the executive level, it seems to me.
Thank you so much. And we have run out of time, or I would ask Sara, and I haven't prepped her for this, so she might shoot me anyway, about how, because she just wrote a blog on cloud neutrality, which is really interesting, about how security, moving your secure data to the cloud impacts that and how you would plan for that. But I'm going to, can you do that in a short period of time, or should we invite people to talk to you afterwards?
Yeah, specifically for one of our HHS customers, or hopefully soon-to-be customers, they're looking at moving to the cloud, but want to make sure that they're not locked into one particular cloud vendor solution. And so I wrote a blog post with them in mind. It's a California organization, so you can go to the MarkLogic blog site or talk to me afterwards to get some tips on cloud neutrality.
By the way, I didn't really introduce Sara properly. She has, she's really an engineer. She has patents and technology, and she's a thought leader and a very forward-thinking person in technology. So if she invited you to talk to her, pick her brain. We are running out of time, and I know that I told you that I'd like you to take away 3 nuggets, and I said we're going to give you those nuggets. So I'm going to ask each panelist to leave you with their last thought or the nugget that they would give you around how to prepare for the unknown. Tracy.
So given the topic of this session, I would say embrace the unknown because resistance is futile.
Well, I would say, to amplify that, leadership needs to brace the unknown. Don't wait for it to happen to you. Something is going to happen. Do your best to be prepared for it.
And you are all leaders because you're in this track today or want to be leaders in your organization. Sometimes it's tough to make those decisions to stop doing something that you've always done and try something new. But I challenge you that sometimes it's actually riskier to continue with the status quo than to do something new. Thanks.
Well, thank you so much to our esteemed panelists. Can we give them a hand? And thank you to you for spending your time here. I know that you have lots of choices about what you could be doing with this hour in your life. And again, I always say whenever I come to these things, I want to try to get 3 nuggets, and I want to take something back and actually do something, whether it's change a plan, look into something that you hadn't thought about before, engage with somebody that you haven't engaged with before. Please do that today. We so appreciate PSP for putting on these educational forums for folks, and enjoy and engage. Thank you.